Yeah, let us know when we're back.
We had to switch out cameras, so now we can't quite see as clearly what you're seeing, but we are on and we are ready to go.
Let's see. Here we go. Alrighty.
Good morning.
Good
We're
morning.
back.
We're gonna say here we are back.
The question is, are you?
Are you back?
Are you back?
That would be great. If you can let us know, that'd be awesome.
All
right, we're just gonna go.
Yep.
We're gonna go.
If we lost you, hopefully you'll come back in.
Yep. And if not, then
You'll catch us on the replay.
that's right. So we gotta go.
All right. So we are going to jump back in.
Yeah.
We should probably explain because people are going to watch us.
Let's
so,
go.
because we're probably going to delete the oops.
Maybe.
By the time they see this. So if you were watching before,
Yeah.
the camera was sideways.
It was.
And so
It just looked weird. And if you catch us eyeing that way,
that's where we can actually
that's
see
another
ourselves.
screen.
Yeah.
And so
We're working it out.
We're trying not
we're
to
working
look
it out.
at
We
it.
have our little home studio.
That's right.
We're
Hey,
fixing.
Lisa, good to see that you're thanks.
Hey,
All
Lisa,
right.
are we back? Were we not standing like we were?
Are we up
laying
right
sideways?
now?
That was what was
Are
happening.
we no longer laying down? Because that is good to know. All right.
All right.
We're gonna go.
So we're going to pick back up at principles of maturity.
Yeah, we're gonna start back at the principles.
So, okay. So we were talking about how someone's age or stage does not determine their maturity. So you, just because you're 60
Yep.
doesn't automatically equal that you're an elder. It's
Yep.
just not how that works.
Not how that works at all.
Because stages build on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't skip any stages. It just doesn't work that way. If
Right.
you've missed gaps back in infant maturity
Mm-hmm.
or in childhood maturity, you need those in order to be a full elder.
Yeah.
Because remember, maturity is living in your full God-given potential at
Mm-hmm.
any age or stage of life.
Yes.
So by the time you reach elder stage, it was God's design, and
Yes.
it's in you to have the ability to be fully an elder.
Yep.
By the time you reach elder stage, that is His goal.
That's
for
his
us.
goal, and that also means that you've completed and you have all the tasks and skills that you need from the time you're an infant all the way up to elder.
Right.
Yep.
Now, I mean, I pretty much know that
Mm-hmm.
probably doesn't happen really for anyone.
No, we all have gaps.
We do.
Yeah.
So we'll talk more about that. One thing that we talked about before too, if you didn't catch the other video, is that one thing that we want you to know is that maturity is really, really valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It does determine the success of your marriage, of
Yes.
your relationships, of
Mm-hmm.
your parenting, but maturity does not determine your value.
Yes.
So there will be some tough discussions or maybe some tough personal revelations as you follow these studies and as you learn more about maturity
Yeah.
and maybe some gaps that exist in you, but that doesn't determine your value.
Yes.
This is not a measuring stick of your human
Of your
worth.
worth. No, not at all.
By any means. This is really just a tool to help you identify places that you can grow.
Yeah.
And then our goal is to make sure that you have the ability and practical
Yeah.
ways to grow through those so that you can really be who God created you
Yeah,
to be.
and I want to say this here too. We don't have this in our notes anywhere, but maturity it's a natural thing. So like you're growing through the infant and the child and the adult. That's a natural part of life. That's the way God designed us naturally to
Right.
grow. And so the great thing is when we are able to have all the skills that the Lord has given us for natural growth and natural just life working together, then you add the Lord on top of that, and now we can truly operate in the true potential because now we are fully who we are supposed to be as humans and individuals combined with fully God working in us and through us.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That's a great way to put
And
it.
so now we're able to,
I haven't thought much about how that does limit
Yeah.
right, God's
Oh,
ability
absolutely.
to work through us when we're not operating at our full potential. Interesting. Okay.
well, and it's so cool because our God is so loving that He even says, I'm not going to give you more than you can handle.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that does have a direct correlation with maturity for sure.
Right. So I don't know. I was thinking about that as we were talking
Yeah.
that through.
It's interesting that you use the word natural because one of the things that we talk about though is that maturity isn't automatic though
Right.
either.
Uh-huh.
So just because you live through your days doesn't mean that you're automatically going to mature.
Yes.
Because as you talked about before, every maturity stage has needs and tasks.
Yep.
So there's things that you need from other people, from your community,
Yeah.
to be able to grow through maturity. And then there's things that you're responsible for doing at each stage of maturity. So if either one of those sides is missed, whether your community isn't showing up for you or didn't show up for you as a child, and when we say community, it's just an easier way to say
Family.
parent, family, grandparents, whatever your family unit was, and also your extended community.
Yeah.
I think here in America we forget, because we all live in our own little houses, and especially in the middle of this, we're like siloed into our own little houses, and we don't have the same multi-generational interaction that happens across most other countries in the world. Are very multi-generational. And when we would say community, say in India, like they have a
They have a
really
community.
they have a really solid concept of that.
And, yeah, there's 3 or 4 generations living in the same home.
Right. Constantly helping each other grow
Yeah.
and feeding into each other. And we miss that here. So when we say community, don't think necessarily with a Western mindset, because we really believe that actually we're missing out,
Yeah. Yeah.
because our culture isn't naturally designed to be multi-generational here in the States.
Yeah. And so part of that too is the natural part of that, but we long to mature. Right? It's a natural desire for us to mature, because if you think of a little boy who's 4, and he's the baby. He's like, I'm not a baby.
I'm a big boy.
I'm a big boy. It's like this natural.
in us, yeah.
Or you're a teenager and they call you a kid. You're like, no, I'm not a kid.
I'm a teenager.
I'm a teenager.
Oh,
So,
cool.
yeah. So,
Or at that point, they think they're like 27.
right. But there's this natural
figured out.
this natural desire to mature.
Right.
But few know how to obtain and maintain even that maturity level to
Yeah.
teach others.
Well, because one thing that we found so fascinating about what Jim Wilder discovered is that it's like, oh, this is actually measurable.
Yeah.
So the most fun part about this is that because it is measurable, we can not only measure where we are and what's going on with us, but also as the community for other people, as parents, we can measure, are we doing what our kids need to be able to grow? Like,
Yeah.
are we providing them with what they need?
Yeah.
And are we holding them responsible for their tasks and
Yeah.
what they need to do to continue to grow? I mean,
Exactly.
I think we could probably agree as we look around that there's lots of, especially young adults right now, who are missing and are immature. Like you can see they're not quite ready to take care of themselves. And as we talked about, we won't go back over this here, and we're kind of getting off on a tangent, but the interesting thing about the stages is that the goal is you're actually an adult by the time you're 13.
Yeah.
And so, which is a little bit mind-blowing here, I think, in the U.S., but that is the idea, is that we should be growing through maturity and be ready to take care of ourselves by the time we're 13.
Yeah.
And that's just not something that's really true about here. But
Anyway, moving on.
Tangent.
Tangent.
So,
I knew that.
so unresolved A and B trauma can actually prevent you from growing through stages of maturity. And A and B trauma, we're going to do a quick summary of that. So A is the absence of what was needed. So that would look like caregivers who did not provide for your basic needs, or that might look like some form of neglect,
Yep.
emotional, mental, physical. And B is bad things that happen to you. So a lot of times people think of trauma as an abusive situation or some sort of actual abuse that happened or some sort of traumatic event. But trauma is not just B trauma. There is actually A and B trauma, and both can be blockages to growing maturity.
And it's debatable, but I feel too sometimes even B trauma is actually a little easier to get over and to walk through. I want to say get over. That's a bad word.
Yeah.
To walk through.
Yeah, because it's a little more tangible,
It's
isn't
tangible.
it?
Yeah. You say
This
this
particular
happened to me.
experience. Yeah.
This experience happened to me. It happened to me. I saw it physically, whatever it was, I experienced it. So you're able to deal with it, and your mind can wrap your head around that a little bit easier. But when you don't get what you need, then your mind can't wrap your head around that as easy.
Because it's not tangible.
It's not tangible thing.
It actually wasn't tangible, and that's the challenge.
Exactly,
Yeah.
that's the problem. So, so a couple other things quickly here about some of the principles of maturity is that it never ends. Maturity never ends. It's an ongoing, never-ending growth pattern, which is fantastic because the Lord made our brains to work that way, that you can continue to grow with your community. You can you can never stop growing.
Right. And
If
we
you choose
actually need our community to not only get unstuck in maturity, but to stay unstuck. So
Yeah.
community is so important to help us to not just grow in the first place, but
Right.
to stay growing.
Yeah.
There's an old saying that if you're not growing, you're dying. And I think that's true, even in maturity.
Yeah. And so, and also in community, we all need someone to let us know that who we are and that we're loved unconditionally. Like we need those things. That's just what we need. And that's also part of establishing identity within ourselves, which is also part of that maturity process, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So,
Yep. And one key thing about maturity, especially as we talk through each one of these stages, is that maturity isn't about starting where you think you are or where you want to be.
Yep.
It's about being honest about where you are and where there may be gaps.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Again, maturity does not determine your value in any stretch of the imagination. You are worthy to be loved, and you are created in God's image. So, but in this life, we have trouble, and there are gaps that exist. So,
absolutely. We said this earlier, that maturity is not automatic. Each stage has both needs and tasks. So we're going to talk about what those are, but there's things that we need to do as individuals, whether that's simply receive or that's go out and learn something. And it's something that our community, again, and our family, they have to provide for us.
Right.
In order for us to truly mature and to have all the skills that we need to be who Lord created us to be.
Yeah. So before we jump into defining infant maturity and talking through the specifics of that, we wanted you guys to know that our whole goal of doing these workshops, we have basically 3 key goals.
Yep.
And so, one, they're to help you identify where gaps might be in your maturity. Because without being able to identify, have language, have a way to measure, you just don't know. You'll know once you hear them. Like, oh, okay, that's why I struggle with that. It honestly was the key piece of our healing, was to realize, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, and it's fixable. Okay,
you can
let's
put a
do
name.
this.
You can put a name to it, and you can attack it.
Yep. You're not just broken, or there's not just something wrong with you, or you can't just do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Like, there is a reason behind it, and you're gonna probably find that reason somewhere in one of these teachings, or maybe in multiple points of these teachings.
The other part of that is that we want to just give you practical things that you can do to grow in your maturity.
So as you're identifying those gaps, we're going to be providing practical ways to grow through those.
And then also practical ways and practical tools that can help you complete the tasks that you've missed.
Yes.
So identify practical tools so you can grow in your own maturity. And then the third thing would be giving you tools to help your family, your community, your kids, your parenting, for those that you are with in your community, to help them grow also into maturity.
Right. Because remember how we talked about that there's needs that every person has, that they need their community to show up for them. So guess what? You're also a community. Not only are you an individual, but you are someone else's community.
Yes, you
and
are.
And so we want to provide tools that not only are you thinking about you and your own growth and healing, but you're also looking around you and knowing more and better about how to meet the needs of those that either might be your kids or might be someone you mentor. Might even be another family member or a good close friend. So, and this isn't, number 3 is not about, pointing out, oh, you're immature and I need to fix it. No. That's not the point. The point is you showing up in what you know to provide in areas maybe they don't even know.
Yes.
And be able to give out.
That's good.
Out of your excess. So.
That's really good. Okay, so that's our review, and that's a little bit about, not a little bit, that's why we're here. And those are our goals and what we really hope that you can receive from today and the next 4 weeks that we do this.
Yeah.
So now let's jump right in. Let's go ahead and talk about the infant maturity stage and what that is and what that looks like. So infant maturity is usually ages 0 to 3. That's where we'll start. So that's we're gonna, and also guys, as we do this, think of when we're gonna refer to, but as babies, as kids, as young adults. So just as we talk about this, kind of keep that in mind as we talk through this. So the primary goal of an infant is to learning to receive and to live in joy and peace.
Yep, that's their goal. That's their only job. I don't know about you, but I'm pretty visual, so I'm always thinking about, like, I don't know, I picture a little baby,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
how simple their life is, and how content they can be just by being loved
Yep.
and being in an atmosphere of love.
Mm-hmm.
So the infant stage needs, in reality, infants don't actually know what they need. So infants don't come out and they're like, "All right, guys, I need to be fed every 3 hours,"
No.
and hey, my diaper needs to be changed.
It would make parenting a lot easier.
Oh gosh, wouldn't it though? So instead, because all we get is cries and body language, as a community, we have to figure it out, don't we? It's
Yeah.
kind of a guessing game in the beginning, especially in those newborn stages where, and especially as a first time parent, you're like, I don't know. And then you learn that special little whine or cry means X, oh, that means they're hungry. Or when they do this particular thing, when they start rubbing their eyes, that means they're tired. Or, so you learn to start to pick up on their cues. But their important needs need to be met without asking,
Yeah.
because they can't. And as an infant too, that's not just physical needs. It's easy to think about
Yeah.
the tangible, like food and diapers and all that, but also their mental and emotional
Yeah,
needs.
I just need to be held.
Yep, I just need to be held. Or I'm really upset right now and I don't know why. But and a lot of times too, if you've parented a little guy, you know that you can't usually fix whatever the source problem is,
Yeah.
right? Like in the beginning stages, a lot of times it's teeth growing in. Well, you can't keep the tooth from growing in. You
No.
can't kill the pain completely. So a lot of times you're providing emotional support for that pain.
Yeah. Yep. It's another thing too is that kids need to their need is for you to attune to them, or just what they call synchronize with them. But that's exactly what you were just describing. That's what that. Oh, I know what that whine is, or I know what that cry is.
Yeah.
I know what that look on their face is. You went pooping your diaper. I know exactly what that
Yeah,
looks
because
like.
you've attuned to them.
Yeah.
You're paying attention to their facial features and what they're
Their
doing.
body movements.
Their body movements, the sounds they're making. You kind of get into rhythm with them. And that's a great way to describe attunement, because
Yeah.
we'll talk about attunement the more videos we do. But attunement is basically getting into synchronization with someone else.
Into rhythm, yeah.
Into rhythm and being able to pick up on what their cues are. We've
Yeah.
been married, 22 years, right?
22,
And,
yes.
and so,
22.
like, there's things that Tennyson can do with his face or his body language or a sigh he makes. And I know exactly what he means
And
without
it's
him
annoying
saying it.
sometimes. But it's so true, and vice versa.
Yeah, but it's good. But attuning, the trick to attuning is not just picking up on it
Yep.
and saying, "Oh, okay,
Yeah.
or whatever." It's the I'm gonna get into the boat with you, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna just be here with you. Like
Yeah.
with that little guy who's screaming because his tooth is growing in. You're not just like, "Oh, I just wish you would quit screaming. I'm gonna put you over there, and good luck with that." Instead, you're like, "I can't fix the pain, little guy, but I'm gonna get in this boat with you,
Yeah,
and you
we're
and
gonna
I
talk
are
about
just
that.
gonna
Yeah.
be together."
That's
So-
really good. Yep. And so an infant's fundamental need is to receive unconditional love and care without having to give anything in return, because they can't.
They really
They
can.
really can't. And so their goal is just to receive love, and that's a need that they have. To learn that they have value for just being them, for just breathing, for being on the earth. They have value.
And the challenge is we really can't learn how to give in life until we've learned how to receive. The Lord
Absolutely.
literally created it to be that way. So this will come up later in life if there's a struggle in being able to give or in being able to receive. You probably didn't have an opportunity to learn how to just receive for
Yeah.
breathing, for just existing, for just being you.
Yep.
Having someone lavish on you,
Yeah.
and want to give to you, give care to you just because you were.
Yeah.
And that's a key need that an infant has, and it's a key thing that creates a foundation for our maturity.
Absolutely. Another thing is that babies or infants need people to be happy to be with them in every emotion that they have, and then be able to bring them back to a state of joy. Bring them back to happiness, bring them back to joy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it's that same situation where this is 0 to 3. So you have the 2-year-old toddler who's having the complete meltdown
Yes.
and has themselves thrown on the floor. And if they have a parent who says, "Oh, I hate when you're so ugly like that. I don't want to be with you,"
Right.
that creates this disconnection. The parent should have enough emotional capacity to be able to continue to stay with the child and say, "I don't like the way you're acting right now. This isn't okay, but we're okay.
And I'm
You
happy.
and I are okay,
Yeah.
and I'm so glad to be with you." Yeah, because then the child learns that, oh, I can have tough emotion, because that poor little 2-year-old is having feelings it doesn't even know what to do with,
Yeah.
right? Like we want to place like an adult brain on that little guy and think, oh, you're doing this on purpose. You are throwing on a fit on purpose. Most 2-year-olds do. However, there's also this other, literally within their brain and within their body, they're learning, like they're being introduced to emotions that they hadn't had before.
Yeah.
You aren't born
Every
with all
day.
your emotions. So as you grow
Yeah.
just in child development, you get emotions at around 2, and then they're there, and then you have to be taught
How to regulate them.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the needs that an infant has, is how do I regulate these overwhelming emotions when they
So-
become overwhelming?
Yeah, so what does it look like for a parent who didn't have those needs met, and now they have a child who has those
needing
things,
those
who
needs
needs
met,
those
yeah.
needs, and now they don't know how to regulate their own emotions, let alone help regulate the emotions of their child.
Right.
I mean, and that's where sometimes you'll see, like they talk about baby shaken syndrome, or you see different abusive things like that, because you just lack those skills to be able
Right.
to
You have parents who
regulate.
are lacking the ability to regulate their own emotion. So when someone else has a big emotion, they can't show up for that either, and
Right.
it ends up triggering their emotions.
It triggers them. Yeah, so it's
So,
this, their trigger triggers them, which triggers them. We
Which
live
is
that
why
a little
maturity
bit.
is such a gift, and
Yeah.
and why filling some of these gaps really does, like we said in the beginning, make us much more successful
Yeah.
in our marriage and our parenting and all of those things.
Yeah. So,
So,
go ahead.
yeah, I
Next
just
one.
thank you. So another piece too is that joy bonds with parents. What an infant needs is a good, solid joy bond with their parent.
Yeah.
What in the world is a joy bond? So a joy bond is that same kind of thing that we're alluding to here, is that I am really glad to be with you. We define joy as glad to be with you.
Yep.
And the experience of having someone glad to be with you.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about, different, maybe you've gone on a vacation with your family or sat at the beach. And when you think of that moment, it literally brings a smile to your face. You have joy about it. It's not because you were happy per se. It was because you had people who were glad to be with you, and you were glad to be with them.
Yeah.
And so an infant needs to learn what that's like and experience what that's like. And it's kind of sad to think about that that's not just an automatic,
Yeah.
right? That there may be some of you who are like, I don't know that I've ever known a baby that had people that weren't glad to be with it. But unfortunately, that's not true. We've
Yeah.
done a lot of work with kids from foster care, and in different tougher parts of the world, and that's not an automatic. And
Yeah.
so I think it's important to know that that does exist. Even in my own story,
Yeah.
I didn't have parents who were healthy enough to just be glad to be with me.
Yeah.
And it created gaps in my own life.
Absolutely. Another part of that is that identity is built around joy or fear. So what does that mean? So when you are able to, so imagine a child that has one of the big emotions, and their parent or their community is able to bring them back to a state of joy. So what that's going to do, that's going to connect them, and that's going to build, like we just said earlier, a joy bond. That's going to build something that's a very joyous occasion to know that, okay, they're happy to be with me, they can bring me back out of this emotion. But if you have a child that your community is not able to do that for you, then that's going to create a lot of fear and anxiety in that child, and they're not going to know what to do. They're going to think that they need to do something in order for them to receive that joy from you.
Right.
So what that's going to do then, it will determine really how you connect to people the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah, it does. It affects your ability to attach. It
Mhm.
affects those feelings of rejection. A lot of times you'll walk around feeling like nobody wants you to just be there unless you're doing something.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it becomes this performance thing that where I have to do this to get your love and your joy and your
Acceptance.
acceptance and all of that. And so that will determine really how you attach to people for the rest of your life.
And I think this kind of got a little bit stirred, I think, even in the church culture a few years ago when we talked about we have a good father who is so glad to just be with us.
You don't
Just to
have
be
to
with us.
do
You don't
anything.
have to do anything.
Yeah.
Especially since we came out of a whole decade or so in the church culture of like, if you don't do XYZ, you aren't going to make it in the kingdom. And so it's so funny how we like,
We've
it depends
switched.
on, I guess, who's leading, and what their,
Their mindset.
their
is.
mindset is. But, oh gosh, I won't get off on the tangent, but somebody taught just recently, I heard a message about how they talked about how fatherhood is the final part of the Trinity, and
Oh,
how
yeah, that was
the
so
Lord
good.
is revealing to us in this season, like Jesus was definitely highlighted for a season in the church, and the Holy Spirit was highlighted for a season in the church
And now,
through Azusa and all of that, and now now God is highlighting fatherhood and the relationship of a father within the church. But when that first started to be revealed, I think a lot of people really struggled with, I don't understand acceptance. I don't understand that I have a God who wants to just be with me, because
Yeah.
my life experience has told me my dad never wanted to be with me,
Yeah.
or my mom never wanted to be with me, or that's been my life experience. So to think of having a God who is righteous judge and has a right to crush me for all my sins.
yeah,
Wait,
Want to be with me?
he wants to be with me, because they've never understood that from day one.
it's crazy. Yeah,
It
that's
is.
so true.
Yeah, another key stage for infants and a key need is to learn how to rest and to quiet with others.
Yes.
Now this sounds so like funny, but I think especially in Western culture, we have a super hard time just quieting and resting.
Yeah.
We've gotten good in the social media age to just like scroll on our phones.
This is how we quiet.
Yep. But our bodies need it, right? So we're doing something that our body is asking for, but the ability to just sit and just be and just to be quiet is actually a learned skill.
Yeah.
That should be taught in infancy.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday with Janelle's family. When they're down in Georgia, we go to Georgia, and it's our house down in Georgia. That's crazy. But anyway, but we go down there, and we talk. We sit on the porch, and we'll talk, and then they'll just stop talking,
And we just
and they just sit there with each other, and
Just
they're
rock.
quiet, and they just rock, and they watch the cars drive by, and we wave, and we do things, and
well, we don't do things.
that's the thing. They
We
don't
don't do anything.
anything.
We
And
don't talk.
They don't talk.
We just rock.
And
And we're
it-
just glad to be together
Yeah, and
on the porch.
it drives me crazy because I wasn't brought up that way, and so for me, that's a skill that I'm learning.
Yeah.
And so being introduced into their family, into their way of life, that's something that I'm learning. It's still a little maddening to me sometimes, just to be completely honest, but there's also something beautiful about it because you're just there together, and we're just happy to be together.
But I would say even like if we're not in those moments, just in everyday moments, I super struggle, even though it's a learned skill for me to just quiet and
Yeah.
be at rest
Mm-hmm.
and just be glad to
There's always
be.
something to do.
Yeah, there's always something to do. So that's an interesting thing that is a skill that has to be learned. So infant stage tasks. So remember too, there's needs and tasks. So tasks are my responsibility, personal tasks.
Yep.
Now, again, an infant can't really do anything. So, as you listen to these, and as we go into the further stages of maturity, obviously, the more mature, just even in physical stature you get, the more you're able to participate in your own growth. As an infant, there's not a whole lot you can do to participate in your own growth, but we are talking 0 to 3. So, by
Yeah.
2 to 3, you start to develop, just in child development, the ability to make some choices.
Yep.
And then you start to take on responsibility for
Yeah.
tasks. But ultimately, it's still left up to your community to help you choose in.
Yeah, and one of those things that we talked about earlier is that at that early stage too, infants, we don't know what we need, and so as you're beginning to make that turn from early infancy to late infancy, then you start to understand a little more about what you need. So as you're starting to turn, like Janelle was saying, you get 1, 2, you begin to understand. Oh, this feeling is hunger. So I'm going to cry because I'm hungry.
Right, you start to, even within yourself, correlate.
Yeah, so-
That's good. So infant stage tasks. So an infant's job, if they had a job description, is they have to learn how to receive.
Yes.
They need to learn how to synchronize and attune with others. Remember, their community is going to provide it first, but then they have to learn how to also synchronize back. They need to learn how to organize themselves into a person through imitation, and you see
That's good.
this a lot. The challenge comes when they don't have a stable person to imitate.
Yes.
Learn to regulate their emotions and self-calm.
Well,
That's a
hey-
huge skill. Oh, do you want to go
Yeah,
back?
let's go back to that. Organize self into a person through imitation. What does that mean? What is that when we say that?
So that's identity. That's where the beginning stages of identity come from.
Yeah.
Is that I'm actually learning who I am by watching who you are.
Right.
So, and we joke because toddlers are so impressionable, right? And half of the fun of having a toddler around is making faces. Like you stick your tongue out,
and they stick their tongue.
And they stick their tongue out.
Yeah.
So they're learning constantly how to mirror.
Yep.
But one of the things they're also learning how to mirror is your emotion of their primary caregiver. They're learning how to care for things. They're learning how to quiet themselves.
Yeah. Okay.
They're learning all those things. So it begins to organize them into an actual person, a personality.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think that's great. That's really good. Thank you for that explanation. So learn to regulate their emotions, to calm themselves. So they're learning what it looks like for, again, that imitation, for someone to calm them, and then they're learning how to calm themselves in that process. Learn to return to joy from every emotion. It's, again, that same thing. It's being able to...
I'm really mad because I wanted that toy and you took, or better yet, I wanted the thing I wasn't supposed to touch in the first place and you took it away.
Right.
And so, helping and teaching children at that age that it's okay that you didn't have what you want. You're all right. You don't need to lose your cool over that. Yeah, you can be upset, but we don't need to throw a 6-hour temper tantrum in the middle of the floor. Look, Johnny, there's another thing over here that you can touch. And we do that all the time with littles. We're constantly distracting. But and distracting is such a sad word because actually what we're doing is saying, okay, let's not let that emotion take over right now. We're going to let that emotion go and we're going to just focus on joy. And it's not in a way that we're teaching them how to avoid emotion.
Correct.
That's not the goal.
Well, but I think in society, and we do that. I think what we've done is we've taught children how to, you can't be mad, you can't be sad, we don't cry, you don't do this, as opposed to saying it's okay to do those things. We just can't let it rule our lives.
Yeah, we're not going to camp out here.
Yeah, we don't camp here.
Yeah.
We're gonna sit in it. We're gonna recognize it. We're gonna understand that it's okay to be sad because you couldn't touch the toy. Or
Yeah,
you
that's
couldn't
a
play
bummer.
with the toy.
Yeah, I know you wanted to play with that. Would look like an appropriate response. Yeah, that is sad that you couldn't play with that. Or I can understand that you're upset, but that's not safe for you. So let's find something that you can play with and that you can enjoy. So there is, because in adult life that would look like, I'm really sorry you didn't get that job that you wanted. That is a bummer. Oh man. Okay, so what else can you do? Let's look at something else that you can enjoy.
Right.
And learning to recover in an adult situation. So you're learning that way back.
Yeah.
And so really ages.
Yeah, and you're learning how to, so you're being taught a skill, and then you're learning how to implement that skill
For the rest of
your life.
Yeah. So back to organizing self into person is learning to be the same person over time.
Yeah.
People who do not get their needs met in infancy, you'll see that they can't. It sounds funny, the same person over time. This often looks like a boss that you show up to work and they're just a different person every day. Like they get up, or you may have some other relationship in your life where each day they wake up, you come into contact with them and you're like, who is Mr. Smith going to be today?
Yeah.
Oh, today's not a good day.
It's not a good day. We're going to stay away from today.
Yep. Or the next day you come in and you're watching Mr. Smith's reactions and, oh, okay, today's going to be a good day. And the whole staff is like, okay, so that's that being the same person over time. There should be a consistency to who you are. People should not feel like they have to test your temperature every time you walk in a room.
Walk on eggshells?
Walk on eggshells. That's like, oh, today's a bad day.
Yeah.
We will have bad days. That's part of being human.
But it shouldn't be every day.
But it shouldn't be every day. And it shouldn't be part of your normal identity or personality.
Yeah. And it's those people that, without beating the dead horse, that's probably a really horrible statement. I don't even know why. Anyway. Wow. Okay, we're live. But it's the unfortunate child and that literally comes home from school every day not knowing what kind of mood dad's going to be in.
Yeah.
That's practically what that looks like.
Yeah, very much so.
So.
Another job of an infant is to learn self-care skills. So as Tennyson talked about earlier, there's early infancy where that infant can do nothing for itself. To by the time we're getting closer to 3, that infant should be getting taught how to take care of itself. So simple, basic things. You think of a 2 to 3 year old is starting to learn how to pick up its toys, learning how to I'm trying to think of some really basic things. Maybe wash itself a little bit in the bathtub, learning how to put its cup away when it's done eating, learning how to feed himself. That's a
Yeah.
self-care that I can pick up food and put it in my mouth. When I was first born, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Learning how to say cup or
Yeah.
food or hungry. Those are all
Self-care.
self-care skills. I don't know why I want to combine those words together.
And also, I think even beginning to understand even danger and
Yeah,
what
that's
keeps
good.
kids where it's safe, like boundaries around them. That oh no, that
You can't touch the plug.
can't touch the plug, or you can't go to that tree because it has pokies on it, or whatever it might be. So understanding that
That's good. Yeah,
there's
self-care. Yeah, I like
self care is also it's not
that. Learning to avoid.
learn yeah, and what's good for me,
Yeah, what is good
what's
for me?
good for me, and what's not good for me.
Yeah, that's really good.
So that's another part of that self care.
Good. And learning to rest. Usually a child by this age should be napping on a very regular basis, and it's something that the caregiver has instituted that no, we actually
rest.
take time to rest during the day. And we actually take time to be quiet because a 2 to 3 year old is pretty much nonstop,
Yeah.
except for those nap times. And so teaching them that resting is actually wonderful for you. In fact, I think we should just reinstitute that as adults. I'm down for like.
We are one of the
afternoon
few
nap times.
countries that doesn't do
No, I think we're missing
because
both.
we're working all the time. But that was weird. But also connected to rest is that so that quieting and resting can actually work together because it's that those times where your infant is nestled into your chest and you're both sleeping on the couch. They've learned to rest and quiet with you. And they've learned that resting is a good thing. And resting is not uncomfortable with you.
Yeah, it's actually relational.
Yeah, it's relational, very relational. So it's all of those things that.
And
it's like-
even being the adult on the opposite side
Oh,
of that,
man.
like, you know, anybody who's held an infant lately and they're all snuggled and
Oh, it's
sleeping
the
into
best
you, like
feeling.
it's a feeling, isn't that so
Yeah.
weird? Like there's actually a feeling to it
Yeah.
of connectedness, of
Oh.
rest, of quiet, of like peace, and there's this feeling of like all is right in the world.
Yeah.
Like everything in this world is just going to be okay because in this moment, like I'm fully rested. That's so interesting. I've
it's-
not thought about that.
Yeah, I just think like our grandson, he's almost 1, but like when he was, well, I guess a couple nights ago, I was just holding him. He was resting and he was sleeping, and he like grabs and he just like sticks his head right here, and there's just like this feeling. You can feel him breathing, and you're connected to him, and there's it's you can't explain it. It's joy. It's that it's literally that. He's literally saying in that moment, "I'm glad to be with you,"
And you're saying,
and you're
"Yeah."
saying, and I'm saying to him, "I'm glad to be with you,"
Yeah.
and you can just sit right here, and that's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, the Lord's reminding me at this moment too that really is what we call it quiet time with the Lord. And there's all kinds of different practices of contemplation, but that's really what a great visual picture
Yeah.
of what the Lord really
that's
wants
really good.
that to look like with Him is for us to just climb up in His lap and just breathe with Him and just rest, nuzzle our head in His neck, and be okay there,
Yeah.
and know that everything's right in the world. That baby doesn't have one fear in that moment, and honestly, somehow you
You
don't,
don't
either.
either. No.
And so, learning to rest is such a key skill and something that doesn't end in infancy. It
Right.
is an ongoing thing that we get to practice.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we get to move into the
Here's the tougher news.
tough news. So this is what an adult would look like with holes in their maturity at the infant stage. So an adult that did not receive or get all the skills, but not learn all the skills
Right.
of it as an infant,
Right.
and they were never. They went and they didn't go back to that spot to fill those needs.
Yeah.
So you have one. You said they will not ask for what they need because they believe if others really loved them and cared for them, they would automatically know what they need and just give it to them.
Yeah. This is a list, but I want to stop here because this is actually a really key part of my story, and I think I shared it before when we taught on the overview.
Yeah.
But this was one of those areas that I didn't realize was the driving factor of my life in all of my relationships.
Yeah.
All. I had lived 40 years being very frustrated with friendships, frustrated in my marriage, frustrated in my professional relationships because I had not gotten my basic needs met as an infant. And so I had this core belief that if other people really cared about me, they would be able to read my mind somehow, and know what I needed and meet it. Because that was the job of my parents when I was a baby, absolutely. And the Lord created that to be that way. I didn't receive that. So I'd spent 40 years trying to still get that, trying to still get those needs met like an infant would cry for their needs to get met.
Yeah.
My cry became silent, and it actually became to look like withdrawal. It came to look like I would leave a relationship when they weren't automatically reading my needs and meeting them. So when I started on my healing journey, my personal healing journey, this was a key piece of learning, like, oh man, I'm so, like, disappointment is what drove me into the wall. Was disappointment in myself, disappointment in God, disappointment in my relationships, because they kept failing me. And what they were failing me at was not meeting my infant need. Yeah. And so I was in a marriage where I was so angry at you because I needed you to read my mind and meet my needs, and I didn't even know what I needed. Yeah. So how in the world were you supposed to know what I needed and meet it? And once I learned that, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. People are actually glad to be with me, just because I'm me. Yep. And I can't expect people to read my mind and figure out what I need and meet it if I don't know what I need. Yeah, like, exactly. What in the world? That's not fair. That's not fair to put on them. And it was never a conscious thing I was doing. It was a complete subconscious thing I was doing. Because it was a need you had that you didn't even know you needed to have. Yeah. Say that again twice. Exactly. So very interesting how that was so affecting things. Yeah. And I didn't even know it.
And I do want to say this too. So in that story and in all of our lives, that please do not mistake that as your parents we're saying that parents were horrible. Right. No. Or that you had bad parents. Right. There were just things in your life that they were unable to meet, and that doesn't make them bad or good or anything like that. It just is.
This isn't an accusation against parents by any means. All of us as parents have done what we know to do. Yep. And so, like, even in my situation, by the time I realized this, I was 40. Yeah. I had raised my kids. Yeah. And so I've raised my kids with a major gap in my maturity. Yeah. And so there will be things that my kids will they have gaps too, because I had gaps. And so that's part of where this is at. But what we really hope this does is help stop that cycle of not knowing. We didn't know, our parents didn't know for sure 50 years ago what emotional maturity was, or all the brain science, psychology things that we know now, personality tests, all that. Our parents had no clue. Right. So now we know, and now we know how to grow. And so what we want to do is say, let's do that together. Yes.
So we have a few moments I want to make sure we get, because we want to get to.
We will probably run a little bit over just because we started a little late. So if you have to go, feel free to just catch it on the backside. Yeah.
So adults who, with the holes in the infant maturity, they will not be able to take care of themselves or others emotionally, because so what happened again, it's that skill of learning how to return from a big emotion, being sadness, fear, anxiety.
We kept talking about the big emotions, and so I was looking up on my phone earlier. Yeah, because we always forget the order, but it's anger, fear, sadness, hopeless despair. This isn't a complete list.
Well, there's 6.
Disgust is another one. And there's one other. I can't remember what it is. But so when we're talking about 6 big emotions, that was meant to be an actual list. It wasn't one. But you get the idea. They're not, and it could even be over elated joy, or not joy, but happiness or surprise. But coming back to neutral is the goal, from like, whoa, big feeling, down to, okay, back to neutral. I don't have to live in, like, I might feel really hopeless right now because something devastated happened to me. I don't have to live there. Or I might be really angry right now, but that doesn't have to last for days on end.
Right.
I know you wanted to look up the actual list. We'll provide it in the resource.
We will.
It'll be there.
All right. Found it.
So I can't take if I haven't learned this if I didn't learn this as an infant, I'm now an adult. I can't regulate my emotions very well, and I certainly can't help you regulate your emotions very well. We can't, and especially trying to do it in relationship is often very tough for people who have gaps.
Yep. Um, Another one is that you won't be able to appropriately, or you won't be able to receive important things from others.
Because again, that goes back to that need to learn how to receive. And if I didn't learn how to receive, I often can't in my adult life.
Right.
Even compliments.
Yeah, that's what we're going to say next. It's like even the compliments or constructive criticism and or just things that to help you even improve that will help you improve, but you take it as a personal attack because it becomes this where you just don't like me and you're telling me that I'm da 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 da. When really it's just no. I'm just letting you know that you're awesome. We just need to
Grow here.
grow
yeah.
here. And you can't accept that because you don't know how to receive the good things. So you can't even, there's no way you can receive
Challenging things.
things.
Yeah, that's true.
So you often become possessive in relationships, powers, in power, or even in like your things.
Yeah, and possessions.
Yeah.
So goes back to that 2-year-old.
Mine.
Basically, you're a grown adult saying mine, mine, mine. I think this is really interesting.
You're those storks
Yeah,
on,
from Nemo.
yeah, Finding Nemo.
Mine. But possessive in relationships, if you find yourself having a hard time sharing friends, that if Susie is your friend and
that's
you're
good.
watching on Facebook that Susie's also spending time with Jenny, and you're feeling like that real frustration of like, no, I thought Susie was my friend. That might be an indicator that you have that gap there.
Yeah.
You may see leaders, bosses, leaders in other areas who are possessive of their power and they're not interested in really anything else than maintaining that power. They may treat people poorly because of it. You may have a boss who you do all the work and they take all the credit. That can look very similar there. And also in possessions, if you have this deep fear of like people taking things from you or fear of like the way that people are handling something, they come over and they touch your stuff and you're feeling this mine. That can be an indication of infant maturity.
Yeah.
Immaturity.
Immature.
Or
Yeah.
a gap
Yes.
in the area of infant maturity.
Yes. So also you might see really high functioning adults in many areas of life, but due to their emotional immaturity, they find it hard and difficult to have successful and enduring relationships.
So they could have a great job, but
It's all conditional on what's in it for me and what are you going to do for me and well, you offended me or you told me that I wasn't this, and so you cut them off because you're like, no, you're supposed to love me and give me what I need and feed into that.
right, that's really good.
As
Yeah.
opposed to, oh, okay, so I need to, you get your quarterly review and there's like 20 things on the list and 18 are off the charts and there's 2 that are like, but these are areas like coming on time and whatever. And you're like, no, that doesn't matter because you love me, so I don't need to worry about these things.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. I was thinking of relationships where you feel like you have to come in with like a list of 7 things before you can say one bad thing, because you know that they're going to get really upset with the one bad thing.
Yeah.
Sign of a gap in infant maturity.
Yeah.
So one other thing too, you'll see this in leaders or even in elders. We talked at the beginning how you can be 60 years old and still have gaps in infant maturity. I shared how at 40 I still had gaps in my infant maturity. And one,
I had a thought. Go ahead. Sorry.
where'd you go?
Yeah.
You wanted to talk about the old man in the coffee cup?
Yeah, I was gonna say it's that. So we all know that. I don't say we all know this guy, but we've all seen it, and we, at times may have done it ourselves. But it's the older guy that you would look at. And he's very distinguished, and he's like, you've lived a great life. You're mature. You've done all these things. But he's sitting in a coffee shop, and he makes all these sideways comments about coffee. Like, hey, what's the guy got to do to get coffee? I mean, wow, I really wish I had some more coffee. Or the guy that kind of snaps his fingers and does one of these things. Yeah. And literally what that is that he was never taught how to ask for what he needs.
Right.
Which is,
he never made it all the way through that stage of identify. He's figured out
he
he
identified what he
needs
needs, but he hasn't been able to ask to have
Excuse
that
me,
need
miss, could I please have more
filled.
coffee?
Yeah, and so he got through the infancy maturity, and then for whatever reason, when he got that last part of it, he wasn't able. It just didn't happen for whatever reason. It wasn't.
Yeah.
He didn't. That wasn't
Yeah.
finished.
And I think just to circle that up, that could look like back to even my story in a marriage relationship or in any kind of friendship, to say, hey, I really need this from you when I'm struggling. I need you to do this. Or right now I'm really upset and I need you to give me 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or Susie, when you spend time with Jenny, I need you to XYZ. And not like you can't spend time with Jenny or you can't post it on Facebook. That might not be a great example. But even communicating like, hey, I just need you to know that I have a hard time with that and I'm going to grow in that area.
Yeah.
Those are ways that you as an adult now can learn to grow and practice through that infant stage that you didn't get to practice through before. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some practical ways to do that. So back to my story, one of our notes on here is that, when those primary needs are not met as an infant, you'll spend the rest of your life wanting other people to come and take care of you. And that was very true for me. It's funny because, we had 70 foster kids that we parented. So we functioned in parenting a lot of our lives.
Yeah.
But because that's what I did when I should have been a child, I was parenting. That's a whole other story. But it was interesting because my deepest desire was for someone else to take care of me.
Yeah.
And in all my relationships, I was desperate for that. And so I spent my life being needy in a very odd way of feeling very disappointed in my relationships because people weren't caring for me like I so desperately wanted them to.
Yep. And so, again, just as we walk through this, the primary task as we walk through this thing of an infant is to receive. That's the number one goal. They don't know what they want. They don't know how to get what they need. And so they just have to be able to receive that from the community around them. That's their number one goal. And then what happens, again, like we mentioned earlier, is if that doesn't happen and all the needs and the task and the needs aren't met, then you can possibly have, not possibly, when you get older, you'll have weak and stronger relationships. You won't be able to stay in relationships. They'll be really weak. They'll always be contingent on how
people
you
giving
feel.
You what you want, or what you feel like you need, or not. And if they don't, then the relationship doesn't last, or stays stormy.
Yeah, cuts it off.
So again, and we've mentioned this already, but as an infant grows into childhood, because we'll talk about childhood next, it looks like I'm beginning to learn how to identify what I need and ask for it. That becomes the skill that kind of is the ramp into childhood.
Yep.
So,
like we said at the beginning, so there's 3 things that we want you to walk away from. So we want to talk about just the practical, personal tasks that you can do, some tools that you can do to begin the growth process and to feel
So if there's anything we've said today that you're like, oh gosh, that might be me.
Yeah.
I see how that's an area of my life that I've got to grow through. Or you may even be saying, which will be the next piece we talk about, I can see how my 12-year-old struggles with that, and that's an infant task that they should have learned. It's not too late.
No.
But let's talk about us first.
Yeah. So the hard fact and hard truth of this is that you, as an infants can't meet their own needs.
Right.
And so you're completely dependent on your community to meet those needs for you.
Right.
So if there's gaps and there's skills that you haven't accomplished yet that you don't have, that it's impossible to grow through them without others.
Yeah, completely impossible.
So
because the whole point of an infant is to receive.
To receive.
So you actually have to have a giver in the equation.
Yes.
So snap.
Yeah. So
what does that look like then? Like how do I make that happen? Because I obviously can't make that happen for myself.
Yeah. So one, I think you had to be willing to admit that you have gaps and identify with them.
Yeah.
And you have to find people that are willing to walk with you through those things. Like there has to be a community of people that want to see you grow, that are mature enough and that they want to lean in with you in this season of intentional growth, and tell you the hard things, and you being able to identify it and receive it and begin to walk it out.
And also too, another key thing that someone who in your community who's mature should be bringing to the table in a relationship is joy.
Yeah.
And just that I'm glad to be with you. So this was an interesting part of our journey that we still have not, I think, completely fulfilled. And it's okay. one thing too, I think ideally, because I can be a little bit idealistic, I was out looking for one person
Yeah.
to be this, like to
Yeah.
be the parent that I didn't have, to be the mom I didn't have, or the dad I didn't have, or to fill the gaps that maybe my parents had left. But what it ended up being over the course of time was multiple people
Yeah.
who fulfilled their, like, they had a little role
Mhm.
in being that for us
Yeah.
in the areas that we needed. And I think our hearts are still a little sad because we don't have that.
Yeah.
We don't have a permanent person to be that for us. But the more that we've looked, the more that we've watched, the more that we have intentionally sought out people who are further ahead in maturity, and that's another important part too. Just like we talked about at the beginning of this, you don't want a 60-year-old who's also struggling in major infant
Yeah.
maturity gaps.
Yep.
That won't work out. You'll both end up miserable, and you're going to end up hurt. Look for people who are around you who have maturity about them, who you'll know more. If you haven't watched the overview, this would give you a good idea, because we do an overview of what an elder is. But an elder should be capable of bringing joy to the table and just
Always.
being glad to be with
Yep.
you. They delight in you.
Yeah.
You should feel delighted in their presence just for existing. So that might and that may be something that you just need around you. So you may find yourself setting yourself up to go. I'm trying to think of a nursing. So many things are shut down now, but you might go to a nursing home just to spend time with elderly people, because of the way that their face will light up when you walk in the
Yeah.
door, because they're so glad to be with you.
Yeah.
And they may not know you from Adam, but even that facial response of you walking in the door and them being like, "Oh, I'm
yeah.
so glad you spent time with me," and how all of life slows
Yeah.
down, and you learn to quiet with them because their lives are very quiet, and you listen to their stories and you celebrate in their stories. That actually is a great way to fill some of that infant need.
Yeah. Because you're receiving.
Because you're receiving.
receiving.
You're just there to receive their story.
Yep.
They don't need anything from you. You're not taking care of any of their needs.
Yep.
They're super glad to be with you. And just even like bathing yourself in that is actually a very interesting way to maybe get some of those areas met.
Yeah.
But you also want to find people who are further ahead in maturity to also challenge you, to also offer creative criticism. Is that the right way to put it? That are willing. Constructive. I was like creative. Great words too. Constructive criticism.
Yep.
Like the goal is not that you become a spoiled infant, but also that you have people who are willing to say, "Hey, yeah, I can see this gap too, and let's work through it together. Like
Yeah.
I'm here for you, even on the days I know in my healing process, having people who are willing to listen to me rant on a text message or rant over the phone, and as I'm curled up and I'm bawling. And I call them and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how I'm going to make it past this day. Having people who stayed on the phone with me was meeting this need that I didn't even know it was meeting. They were able to stay with me through a big emotion and still love me to this day. Has been a huge gift that has sealed up a lot of the gaps that existed previously. It is how I learned that people are actually really glad to be with me, and that I don't have to show up trying to pull from people, but I actually have a lot to bring to the table.
Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful for those people
Yeah, me
in
too.
our life.
You know who you are. Thank you.
Yes. And so those are some practical personal tasks that you can do. And then let's look at some practical community tasks. So again, you are a community. So yes,
For someone else, you absolutely are.
you are someone else's community. And so one of the things that you can do is called VCR. A lot of people in our age bracket know what a VCR is.
I didn't think about that. Yeah,
Younger
for your
kids.
20-somethings, there was this little tape.
It was
Anyway.
But it's called VCR, and so it's validate, comfort, and recover. And so really quickly, what that looks like, and again, we'll talk about an infant, and you use this literally at every stage. It just looks a little different. So what you want to validate their feelings. So if you have someone who's really upset, you validate that feeling. It doesn't mean that you even agree with that feeling.
Right.
It doesn't mean that you
think they're right, or that it's even an appropriate emotion to have. Like, it's actually not your job to have opinions about it.
Nope.
It's just your job to be present.
And so you validate it, and you say, it's okay. I understand that you're really upset right now.
And that's easy to picture in the situation of doing this with an infant, of like the infant is trying to stick its finger in a light socket, and and you tell them no, and then they throw this huge fit up, like you just like ruined their whole life,
Yeah.
and you're not like, that is the most ridiculous thing ever. You were about to kill yourself. Like, come on. You should not be so upset about that.
Yeah.
Instead, you're like, oh, I know,
Yeah.
I know you really wanted to touch the light socket,
Yeah.
but you can't do that, And so you validate. Like, you validate, oh, I understand you're upset. It's okay.
Yep, it's okay. And then you comfort. So then what you're doing there too is, as with a baby, it's but if you have an infant and they're upset, you validate the feeling because you're making faces at them and you understand, you're connecting with them, you're tuning with their feeling. You do, oh, I get it. And then you're comforting, that's that bouncing or that you patting on the back. And that's
Or picking up, or
whatever it might be, is that comfort.
Or getting down on eye level.
And then that recover part is helping them to turn that corner to understand that I'm still glad to be with you and it's okay, and we're gonna move on from this, and we're gonna
move on from this
come
emotion.
back to joy and be happy to be together. And we do that, and so just think about this for a minute. We do that with babies. We do it with toddlers usually, and for some reason, when our kids turn about 6 or 7, we don't do that anymore.
Right, we're like, pull it
together. We don't validate feelings, we don't comfort, and we don't help them recover.
Unless it's some sort of like major injury.
Yeah.
Like if they fall off the bike and they get this big, huge road rash, then we're like, oh, yeah, that really hurts, because it's back to being very tangible.
Right.
But we forget that they're whole human beings on the inside that are learning and trying to learn how to regulate their emotions. And the emotion comes whether you want it to or not, especially in those beginning stages. Emotions come.
Yep.
Like, and they should be there. Like, that we've somehow gotten disconnected from the fact that emotions are a God-given gift.
Yes.
They're actually a really good thing.
Yes.
Jesus himself was angry.
Yes.
Like, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad.
Filled with compassion. He was all these different things. And so encouraging those emotions
without camping in them.
Yes, that's the key piece. That's the key. There's a young man that I knew that we were talking at one point, and he would get upset because he would get like enraged with his wife, and he couldn't figure out what it is, and he'd be so mad, and he would say things, and he's like, I don't understand, da da da, and he would go on this whole tangent about like, I've been a Christian for this long, and da da da, and I had to. It was great because I got to look at him and say, this has nothing to do with your salvation. It has nothing to do with your love for God. It has nothing to do with that. This is simply the fact that no one sat with you when you were angry, when you were younger, and helped you get from being angry back to a state of joy.
Yeah.
And all you know to do is to blow up. That's how you relieve, that's how you get rid of it. Instead of letting that emotion, what we call ride the wave, and I'm upset, you get upset, you recognize it, and then you learn how to calm yourself. And you can still be angry, but then you can go back to that person and speak to them relationally.
Restore the relationship.
Restore relationship while you're still upset, and that's fine.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting too. A couple of different things as you were telling that story that I thought about. A lot of times that like explosion of anger is often because no one taught you how to validate your own anger at the time it happened. Yeah. Oftentimes when you're seeing that big like explosion of anger, you weren't just angry for the first time.
Yeah, that's
like you've been angry probably 10 times, maybe even over completely different things, and you didn't validate your own anger. Instead, you were just like, oh, nope, can't be angry right now.
Yeah.
Instead of being like, no, I'm actually really angry about that, and I'm going to be okay with my anger, and I'm going to move on. Like, instead, you're like, nope, and then it becomes this powder keg of anger, and then it's like,
yeah.
So learning to recognize emotion, be okay with it, and move through it and come back to joy on a regular rhythm, like all throughout your day, is such a great skill to learn. And it's learned. It's not something that's like magically happens.
Yeah. And so, and what you're doing in that with the VCR, also you're providing safety and companionship during difficulties, during difficult times.
Yeah.
So you're able to be with them in the middle of their anger.
Yeah.
And they know that you're still happy to be with them, and you're also able to help restore their joy.
Yeah. Think about that as a gift of, as a community, and I think this is true for our parents' generation, without generalizing everybody, but emotion wasn't something, at least in my family, that was welcome to the table.
Right.
And so if I had feelings of any sort, it was like, oh, I can't be here for that. So a tagline in my house was, if you're going to cry, I'm going to give you something to cry about. And so I couldn't just cry out of sadness or upset. It wasn't allowed. And so I didn't have anybody who was like, oh, it's okay. Like, if you need to cry right now, it's okay. I'm going to be right here with you.
Yep.
Or if you're really angry, like, we're used to leaving people in their emotions, just basically exiting. I'm out. Like, that is a lot for me.
Well, and
I already don't know how to take care of my own emotions, nevertheless all what you're doing over there, so I have to go.
Yeah, and that was another one of our issues in our marriage was that. It's like I couldn't handle my own emotions, so when she got emotional about anything, I was like, peace out. I couldn't, because it made me uncomfortable
for me to have feelings.
For her to have feelings. And so literally I would physically or emotionally just leave the room and leave her alone in her emotions. So there was no way for me to even sit with her in the middle of it because I didn't have the skill. I didn't have the skill to do it.
Yeah. And for me, that just reconfirmed yet again that if I had feelings, that meant people didn't want to be with me.
Yep.
So people only wanted to be with me when I didn't have feelings, which then that wasn't really me, right? That wasn't fullness of me. That was Janelle in a box, or that was Janelle with all of her feelings smashed down. And if those feelings ever came out, like, I knew, oh man, I'm going to ruin everything around me. I'm going to damage all my relationships because they're all going to leave if I have feelings.
Yeah.
And so I stayed disconnected from my feelings because of that in an attempt to stay connected in a relationship, when that's not at all how God designed us to be at all. Like, he wants us to not only, he gave us feelings, but he also wants us to experience them with other people.
Yeah.
Like, this life is meant to be shared, even the messy parts.
Even the messy parts. Especially the messy parts.
Especially the messy parts.
That's where the growth happens. It even goes, I mean, so can you imagine as a parent or as a community leader, as someone in your community that's able to sit with kids, infants, other parents, adults in the middle of their mess, in the middle of their strong emotion, and just the gift it is to them for you to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And the gift that you're giving, especially if it's parents, the gift you're giving those kids of that parent that you're able to sit with.
Right.
Because now, so you know,
this is why counseling is what it is. Like, literally, and I've said this, like, through my healing process, I had to pay people to sit with me.
Yeah.
While I had emotion.
Yeah.
To just learn that people are okay to be with me when I have feelings.
Yeah.
Because as I was practicing, as I was learning, as we were learning, and as we were growing, it took a while. I would say probably a year to a year and a half before Tennyson was able to fully sit with me when I had a feeling.
Yep.
And so that's why counseling, often most people find a lot of healing in counseling, is because that person's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's a guarantee, and it's a meeting of that need that you've had actually since infancy.
Yeah. And for me, and I mean, and honestly, there's times where there's still some moments where I check out. But I know that I can do it, and she knows that I can do it. So it's a skill we're talking about next week, but I can do hard things, and I can sit and just be with you in that emotion, and knowing that I can do that, it also changes even how I feel about myself.
Yeah. And another thing too that taught us was that when you left the room, we say left the room, because sometimes he wouldn't physically leave the room, sometimes he would just like emotionally, mentally leave the room. Yeah. So anyway. Like, he's still present, but he's not responsive. Yeah. He's not attuning. Yeah. That now I know that that's actually not me. So that's also been very helpful too. A very big learning skill is that just because I have feelings, if somebody else can't show up for my feelings, that's not my fault. Yeah. That's some area that they also need to grow in. Now, don't misinterpret this to mean that I can go around and spew my feelings on all my relationships and on all my people, especially anger, and think that they're just supposed to like recover and sit there and come back. Don't swing the pendulum. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is, I had a really bad day and I just need to cry and I need you to stay present with me. Or my marriage feels like it's falling apart and I don't know what to do and I don't know who to say it to because I'm really, really hopeless and I'm really scared. And knowing that I can say that to someone and they're not going anywhere is so key. Yeah. Or to even be able to say to your spouse, I'm upset with you. Like this, I'm not okay with whatever's going on here, and to know that like they can stay with you in that frustration. But again, it doesn't give you
Yeah.
permission to mistreat anyone.
No, not at all.
But
It's the exact opposite.
it really is the exact
It's the exact
opposite.
opposite. It's this is what I need. It's being able to express what you need from someone, and then being able to return that, and
Right.
be able to be that person for you, and
Yeah.
all that.
So back to the community piece
Yeah.
of this too. We're like way over time, but this has just been really good, and I hope you guys are enjoying it.
Give us 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes. So one area where I was just picturing this is middle schoolers are notorious
yeah.
for lots of feelings. There is no greater gift than a community of people who will love a middle schooler, because parents can't really be with their middle schoolers in their emotions.
No.
Because it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. That teenager does not want their parent to be with them in their emotions. It ends up creating a lot of conflict in the relationship. If you know a middle schooler, be there for them.
Yeah.
They will have, again, their body is beginning to reignite all those emotions in a completely different way that
Yep.
they do not have the brain skill to manage. It's proven in science.
Yep.
And so show up for them. Even if it's like, I'm just going to pick you up in the car and we're going to go get ice cream and you're going to say all your things and I'm going to stay in the car and I'm going to be glad to
Yep.
be with you and then I'm going to take you back to your house. That is like the biggest gift of a
Yeah.
lifetime. You don't have to have the answers. I think that's important
Yeah.
too. That in this, nobody's trying to fix anything.
Yeah.
I wasn't actually ever needing you to really fix me
No.
when I was having my emotion. And I think we can miss that. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in other
Yeah.
videos. But that's important to tie in here,
Yeah.
too, that the goal of staying present is not to fix. The goal is just to be present and
Yeah.
to validate emotion.
And I will also say this, and then we'll finish these last couple points here along those same lines. As a parent of a middle schooler, find those people that you can connect your middle schooler with, that they've already respect, that they already have a good relationship with,
That have maturity.
that have maturity, that you can work together. Like the old saying, it takes a village to raise a kid. It's
It
true.
really does.
It does.
God designed it that way.
Yeah. And so that you have those other people that you can lean on to say like, hey, I'm just noticing this in my child, and I don't know if you're seeing this or not, but if I bring this up to them, it's not going to work. But you've got a relationship with them where you can say things that I maybe can't say. And look, we've had those for both of our kids actually, are growing
That's
up.
an incredible gift.
And so just be able to say, hey, I'm noticing this. I've talked about it. It's not being really received, and then they can go, okay, and then they, because of who they are, they figure out a way to bring that topic up and bring the subject up, and it creates it's a co-parenting. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about how many times if you've had teenagers, you've said something like 3 times to them, and it just goes completely like one ear and out the
And
other.
their best friend's mom.
Yeah, they come home and they're like, "Oh my gosh, Jenny's mom said today that blah 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 blah," and you're just like,
Yep.
"Yep."
I'm glad.
That's the
that's
first
awesome.
time I've ever heard of
That's
that.
awesome. That's so awesome.
So that's interesting to know too. We do need people that aren't just like, and I think this is true in marriage relationships. Oftentimes, and I talked about this in my story, that I was wanting Tennyson to meet the need of a parent in my life, that meet the infant needs that I didn't receive from a caregiver. He can't be my caregiver. It does not work that way. It puts him in a role that he doesn't belong in. Those infant needs, you need to find not just expect that from your closest relationships, or especially all of that from your spouse. Your spouse, all these tasks, if you're like, oh, I missed these 3 areas, please don't turn to your spouse and say, okay, like, here you go, buddy.
Yeah.
You got to fix all this for me.
And
Not fair. Make sure you're looking out into the community.
Yes.
Look at expanding who is
Yeah.
sowing into you.
And then I want to say this just to the men, any men that are watching or that are going to watch. Your wife is not your mom. And live that life for a while. And it just doesn't work. And so like the things that you needed from your mother, you can't look to your wife to give you those.
Yeah.
Because that just really, that mucks everything up.
Yeah, well, it damages the relationship.
Yeah.
Especially because husbands are supposed to be providing leadership. And so if you're putting your wife in the position of a mom, well, that's impossible.
Yep.
Like, you can't lead her as a child.
Yeah.
And so So yeah, that's a really good point, and I'm sure we're going to teach on that
Yeah, we
probably
will.
in depth. But that is good to include here
Yeah,
for sure.
just because those are those infant things that I didn't receive from my mom that I needed. I can't, Janelle can't give those to me because that messes up. It just muddies the water. It puts us in the wrong position that the Lord has us
Yeah,
set up for.
for sure.
So real quick, last two things, and then we'll get out here because we are over. But thank you for sticking with us, guys. We truly appreciate it. So one thing that you can do also in the community is you want to be able to watch for the needs of others and then just meet them without them asking. So it's like if someone's sick in your community, then you bring them chicken soup.
Yeah, that's why when somebody like does something without you asking for it and they just think of you and they bring you a special thought out gift or chicken noodle soup when you're sick. Obviously most people are not going to get on their phone and be like, all right, who of my 5 people are going to bring me chicken noodle soup? You might ask if you're really stuck, but most people would never ask. But when someone thinks of you, that's why that feels so just like, it's like cuddling the infant again.
Yeah.
It's that, oh, somebody sees me and somebody's meeting my need without asking. Gosh, that's such a nurturing feeling that just not only feeds your body, but feeds your soul.
Yeah.
And you can do that. All of us can do that. Whether we're 12 years old and we see a 3-year-old who wants their shoe tied, or whether we're 60 and seeing a struggling couple who's new in their marriage. And that's actually why elders exist. Their whole job is to look back and look at the needs of the community and to find ways to meet them without them being asked. And and we'll talk more about that. But
And then the very last thing that we have on our list that you can do is just delight in others' pure existence. Just be happy that they're there, and show them that you're glad to be with them and that you share joy with them, and they're being.
Yeah.
They don't have to do anything to receive your joy or your affection or anything like that. It's just you're just here, and I'm so glad you're here, and pay a compliment just because.
Yeah, think about the relationships that you have right now, and are you doing that? I think in a marriage relationship, it's easy to forget to do that actually, and just like remind your spouse that you're just really glad to be with them. Is your face saying that? Is your body saying that? Like, even if I know Tennyson and I, we always have a list of stuff to do, but it's different when my body is saying, I'm really glad to be with you in the midst of doing this. Your teenager who's been a growly bear for months on end, what's your body saying to them? What's your face saying to them? Check on that. Check on when they walk in the door from school, is your face like, oh, they're home? Or is that like, no, I really am glad to be with you. And whether your day was a mess and whether you grunt at me or whether you spill an hour-long analogy of your day, like, I'm really glad to be with you. And that's something, again, too, that you have to practice. It won't happen automatically, but it is a huge gift to those around you.
So that's it for this section here of infant maturity, and just this is the first of 5.
Right. So tune in next Wednesday. We'll be talking about child maturity. One thing before we go, check our website, tableandwellco.com. You're going to find an actual printed resource on all of this. So you'll see a list of needs, a list of tasks. There'll also be a chart of what it looks like when whether the infant wasn't able to fulfill their tasks or whether the community did not meet the needs of the infant, what it looks like in an adult situation, kind of what the resulting factor is. We didn't go over that today because it just so well written in a table form. Check that out. Also, too, there's actually an assessment in that resource as well for you to check and see where you are. Again, it's not to determine that you don't have value. It is to say, oh, hey, okay, this gives really tangible words to an area that I need to grow. And if you need help walking through those areas of maturity, feel free to reach out to us. If there's something that you see, because this language isn't known everywhere, so we struggled in the beginning to like find people and then say, hey, I need help growing in maturity in this area, and they're just like, what are you talking about? We can help you work through some of that, and all groups are formed exactly with this in mind, to help you grow through gaps that you are learning that you have in a safe community. That's why we do relational labs. That is the sole purpose of them. Those are also starting in, a week.
A week.
So,
Less than, if
so
you're-
check those out. You can find those through our Facebook page, or you can find those also on the website.
Yep. Alrighty. Well,
All
thanks,
right.
guys. Thanks for sticking it out with us. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning. We're looking forward to the next 4 weeks with you. So thank you. You guys have an awesome rest of your day, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.